Imagine you're trying to find a mate, but if you step out of your front door to look for one, there is a very real chance you might get eaten.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Not an ideal situation.
No, not at all. But that's exactly the biological tightrope that brings us to today's deep dive, because you have these two instincts that are just completely at war with each other.
The need to hide to stay alive and the need to be seen to reproduce.
Exactly. And, how do you even solve a problem like that?
Well, it requires a highly specific manipulation of your environment. You basically have to find a way to make the architecture around you serve both of those purposes at the exact same time.
Which sounds impossible.
It's an incredibly delicate balance to strike, for sure. And watching an animal actually figure that out in real time is just fascinating.
Which brings us to the source material we are looking at today. We have this wonderfully specific, really personal piece of field writing.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a blog post titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 276, The Benefits of Exposed Artificial Cave. And this was written by an aquarium enthusiast named Ang, published on June 21st, 2026.
And, on the surface, if you're just reading that title, you might assume this is just a niche set of instructions about aquarium setups.
Right, like a how-to guide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you really look at the source material Ang provided, it operates on a much deeper level. It's really a study in meticulous observation.
Wow.
It shows the danger of relying on, visual shortcuts. How easily our brains are fooled by flashy data. And it shows the profound discipline required to simply watch the world without trying to consume it.
So just to give you a sense of what's happening here, our author, Ang, is visiting various fish stores. The mission is pretty straightforward. Ang is observing populations of a fish called the Polar Parrot Cichlid with the goal of eventually stocking some newly set up outdoor ponds.
Right.
But before we get into the whole cave architecture thing mentioned in the title, what exactly is a Polar Parrot Cichlid? Because I hear parrot, and I'm picturing a tropical bird, not a fish.
That's a fair point.
Why do they even need caves in the first place?
Well, that's a crucial starting point. Cichlids, generally speaking, are this incredibly diverse family of fish. But they're very well known for being highly territorial and highly intelligent.
Okay.
And the polar parrot specifically is a hybrid. It's a crossbreed with this rather stout, rounded body. And because they're so territorial, especially when they're preparing to breed, they don't just, drift around in the open water.
Right, they're not just swimming aimlessly.
No, they claim a specific piece of real estate, and they defend it fiercely. So the cave isn't just a place to sleep. It's a fortress.
A fortress, I like that.
Yeah, it's the base of operations for rearing fry, which are the baby fish, and protecting them from other aggressive tank mates.
Okay, so the cave is essentially a defensive structure. But that makes the core observation of Ang's blog post seem like a total contradiction.
How so?
Well, Ang is watching this tank of polar parrot cichlids and notes that to create the optimal environment for these fish to pair or bond, the best strategy is the use of an open or exposed artificial cave.
Right.
Ang observed the largest dominant fish in the tank deliberately occupying this exposed cave, actively waiting there for a female.
Now, that contradiction is the absolute genius of the strategy.
But if the goal is safety, why expose? I mean, an exposed cave feels like an oxymoron.
It does, yeah.
If you're a fish seeking shelter, why would you deliberately choose a spot where everyone can see you? Like, if you think about it in human terms, it's like reserving the open-air VIP booth right in the middle of a crowded, brightly lit nightclub.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Like, you have your velvet rope, you have your protected seating area, but you are deliberately making yourself totally visible to anyone walking by. Why not just pick a dark, hidden cave, stay safe, and only swim out when you want to show off?
Because of the constant vigilance required to hold that territory. If we go back to those dual goals of the dominant fish safety and reproduction, we see why a completely hidden cave just fails.
Okay.
A totally enclosed dark hole offers maximum security from predators, sure, but it offers zero visibility. If you hide perfectly, potential mates have absolutely no idea you exist.
Right. It just swim right past you.
Exactly. Let alone knowing that you possess prime real estate. And you can't just swim out to show off, because the moment you leave your hidden cave unguarded, another male might swoop in and claim it.
Oh, wow. So you have to defend and display at the exact same time.
Precisely. And on the flip side, if you abandon the cave entirely and just swim out in the open water to maximize your visibility to females, you have zero security. You're vulnerable to threats from all 360 degrees.
So the exposed artificial cave is the compromise.
It is the optimal intersection of those two biological imperatives. The cave provides the structural territory, it guards the flanks, it provides a defensible rear position, and it offers the psychological security necessary to trigger those breeding behaviors.
But the front is open?
Right. The openness of the front of that cave, the exposure, that is the advertisement. It allows the dominant male to sit on his proverbial front porch. He doesn't have to leave the fortress to be seen.
He can, like, guard the velvet rope while still being seen by the whole club?
Exactly. And what Ang's observation reveals here is just how nuanced an artificial environment needs to be to facilitate natural behavior.
Yeah.
We tend to view animal habitats in binary terms. It either provides shelter or it provides open swimming space. But the architecture of the space dictates the behavior of the inhabitants. The cichlid isn't looking for a hole to hide in. It is looking for a stage with a roof.
A stage with a roof. That's so interesting. So if the architecture of the cave advertises availability, the next logical hurdle for the fish is making sure they are advertising to the right candidate. Right.
And that introduces a whole new problem, which is mistaken identity. Because once Ang establishes where this dominant fish is positioned, up on its covered stage, the focus shifts to the identity of the fish itself. And this is where Ang's perception really gets tested.
This is definitely the cognitive centerpiece of the blog post. Ang is watching this large, dominant cichlid holding down the exposed cave and makes an immediate assumption about the fish's gender.
Right.
Ang initially believes this particular dominant fish is female.
And Ang is very transparent about why that assumption was made. It all came down to a single flash of color. It was this orangish coloration on the tail fin.
Which is an incredibly natural human reaction.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. We are heavily reliant on visual heuristics. Those are cognitive shortcuts that help our brains process complex environments quickly. Coloration is one of the primary metrics we use to categorize nature.
That makes sense.
We look for bright colors and distinct patterns because they usually mean something significant. But wait, bright colors in nature usually do mean something, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I see a bright blue poison dart frog, my brain doesn't need to do a structural analysis to know I shouldn't touch it.
Right, exactly.
The bright color is a reliable signal, so why wouldn't Ang's brain immediately trust the orange tail? Isn't color usually a solid indicator of sex in birds and fish?
You're bringing up a great point, and it's exactly why that heuristic forms in the first place.
Yeah.
In many species, sexual dimorphism, which is the physical difference between sexes, is heavily tied to color.
Like peacocks.
Peacocks, male guppies, cardinal birds. The males are incredibly vibrant, while the females are often much more muted. So Ang's brain was applying a generally useful rule of thumb. Distinct color marking equals specific gender identification.
Right.
The problem is, a heuristic is a fast automatic response. Psychologists often refer to this as System 1 thinking. It's reactive. But in complex systems, or with hybrid species like the Polar Parrot Cichlid, System 1 thinking often leads to completely false conclusions.
Because the bright color overrides the more subtle structural details, I have definitely fallen into that trap.
We all have.
You see the most obvious data point, like the bright color or the flashy headline or the confident tone of voice, and your brain just stops processing anything else because it thinks the mystery is already solved.
Exactly. It takes a deliberate, conscious effort to switch to System 2 thinking, which is slow, analytical, and structural. The flashy color is highly salient, it demands your attention. But Ang applies a really rigorous internal scientific method here.
Yeah, Ang doesn't just leave.
Right. Instead of just noting orange tail equals female and walking to the next aisle, Ang forces a pause. Ang continues to observe the fish over a sustained period.
And by staying in the aisle, the illusion of the orange tail starts to just fall apart. Ang realizes that the initial assumption was completely backward. This large, dominant fish holding down the cave is actually male.
And the process of how Ang arrives at that correction is what makes this field note so valuable. Ang stops looking at the color and starts analyzing the morphology, the physical structure, and the behavior.
So what were the specific structural clues that proved the orange tail was just a distraction?
Well, Ang details 3 specific variables that overrode the color heuristic. First, the shape of the fins. While the tail had that orangish hue, the fins themselves were distinctively pointy. They were elongated.
Okay, so a structural shape, not just a color.
Right. In many cichlid species, males develop longer, more pointed dorsal and anal fins compared to the more rounded fins of the females.
Makes sense. What was the second clue?
Second was the overall size of the fish. This specimen was exceptionally large, which is another common trait for dominant males. And finally, and I think most importantly, the behavior itself.
Right, the very behavior we just talked about, the act of occupying and defending the exposed artificial cave, that is a male territorial display.
Exactly. The fish is actively engaging in the dominant, waiting behavior required to attract a mate to the territory. When you combine the pointy, elongated fins, the massive overall size, and the territorial cave defense, the structural reality completely negates the superficial color data.
It's just a perfect example of looking past the branding to see the actual substance. Judging the fish's gender by its orange tail is like judging a company's financial health by the color of its logo instead of actually reading its quarterly earnings report.
That is an excellent way to frame it.
The tail is just branding. It might catch your eye, but it doesn't tell you how the organism actually operates. The fin shape, the size, the behavior, that is the actual balance sheet.
Yeah, and the logo in this case was heavily misleading. Ang arrives at a vital conclusion for anyone studying or keeping polar parrot cichlids, which is that orangish coloration is an unreliable variable.
Wow.
It might be present, but it is not a definitive trait for gender identification. In hybrid fish especially, color can be influenced by a multitude of environmental factors that are entirely unrelated to genetics.
Like what?
Things like the specific diet they are fed, the water temperature, the lighting in the store tank, or even just their stress levels.
Oh, so if they're stressed out, their colors might fade or change entirely.
Precisely. If you rely on a metric that changes based on what the fish eat for breakfast, you are going to completely misidentify your population. Size, the structural shape of the fins, and the behavioral roles they adopt are permanent structural indicators.
And there is a lot of discipline in what happens next in this story. Because after breaking down the architecture of the cave and after successfully overriding a cognitive bias to correctly identify the dominant male, we have to look at the result of this entire trip.
Right.
Aang goes to the store with a specific goal, right? Gathering research to eventually stock newly set up outdoor ponds. But after all this meticulous observation, Aang leaves without buying a single fish.
The physical outcome of the errand is 0 transactions.
Yeah. Aang concludes the post by writing, "While I did not purchase any fish for my newly set up outdoor ponds, it was still a nice trip to learn and discover something new along the way."
It's a great takeaway.
And obviously, the idea of learning for learning's sake isn't some new philosophical breakthrough. We all know that knowledge has value. But applying that mindset in a retail environment, a place explicitly designed to make you swipe a credit card, is incredibly refreshing.
It really is.
The temptation to impulse buy, especially after you've spent an hour staring at a fascinating animal, is huge.
It requires a tremendous amount of impulse control and scientific rigor. In a highly consumer-driven society, we are heavily conditioned to measure the value of an outing by the physical goods we acquire.
Yeah, exactly.
If you drive to the store, walk the aisles, and leave empty-handed, it is almost universally considered a failed errand, a waste of gas and a waste of time.
But Aang doesn't view the pet store transactionally at all. Aang treats the commercial space as basically a free biological field station.
Because the ultimate goal isn't just acquisition. If we connect this observation back to Aang's broader project, which is stocking those outdoor ponds, we see why this patience is so critical. Aang is literally building a habitat from scratch. To do that successfully, you cannot just acquire biological units and dump them into water. You need to understand the complex needs of the inhabitants deeply before introducing them to the space.
So by walking out of the store empty-handed today, Aang is practically guaranteeing a much higher success rate for the pond tomorrow.
Without question. Just think about the cascade of errors that was just avoided.
Oh, true.
If Aang had been impatient, relying on System 1 thinking, Aang might have purchased a group of fish based purely on orange tails, thinking there was a balanced ratio of males and females.
Yeah.
They might have been introduced into a pond with completely enclosed, dark caves. The males wouldn't be able to display, the territory wouldn't be established correctly, the breeding would fail, and the aggression in the tank would likely spike because their environmental needs weren't being met.
It would have been a total disaster for the ecosystem.
Exactly.
But now, because Aang exercised the discipline to observe and correct the bias, the blueprint is flawless. Aang knows exactly what kind of environment to construct. Exposed artificial caves are an absolute must for the pond.
Yeah.
And Aang knows exactly how to select the right ratio of fish, ignoring the orange tails and focusing on pointy, elongated fins and dominant behavior.
Leaving the store with practical knowledge, rather than a plastic bag full of fish, makes Aang vastly more equipped to build a superior habitat later. It's a long-term investment in the ecosystem.
It really is playing the long game. And that long game is perfectly captured in the title of the blog post itself. Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 276.
Yeah, I love that detail.
This isn't a one-off epiphany. It isn't some sudden burst of inspiration. It is Part 276 of a continuous, ongoing practice of paying attention to the world. It implies that there was a Part 275, and there will inevitably be a Part 300.
That numerical tag is a testament to the sheer repetition required to become an expert at anything. You don't learn how to break down your own cognitive biases on day one.
No, definitely not.
It takes hundreds of observations to realize that your initial hypotheses are often flawed. It's a compounding of knowledge. Ang has cultivated the humility required to say, I thought I knew what I was looking at, I was wrong, and here's what I learned instead. And writing it down solidifies the lesson.
So, synthesizing this journey we've just been on, we started with a seemingly mundane trip to a retail fish store. But through Ang's meticulous notes, we uncovered the architectural brilliance of the exposed cave for cichlid bonding.
Right.
That intense biological tightrope walk between maintaining a secure fortress and actively advertising your availability to the open water.
And from there, we explored the mechanics of cognitive bias. We saw how easily our brains rely on fast visual heuristics like the deceptive orange tail and the deliberate sustained attention required to shift into analytical thinking.
Yeah, shifting to system 2.
Exactly. By focusing on foundational structural truths like fin morphology and observable behavior, Ang bypassed the branding and read the actual balance sheet of the organism.
And ultimately, it served as a masterclass in the discipline of learning. It was a reminder that treating your environment, even a commercial retail store, as a classroom yields far better long-term results than giving in to the impulse to simply consume.
Absolutely. And as you process this deep dive, consider how you approach your own learning environments. Whether you're reviewing dense material for a major project, analyzing data for work, or just navigating a new personal hobby.
Yeah, are you looking closely?
Right. Are you taking the time to patiently observe the pointy fins of the situation? Are you looking for the structural realities and the actual behaviors? Or are you letting your brain take the easy way out, getting distracted by the orange tail, that flashy, superficial data that leads to immediate but false conclusions?
Because it is incredibly easy to chase the orange tail. It takes a fraction of the energy. But pausing to find the underlying structure changes the entire outcome of the project. Ang walked out of that store with nothing to physically show for the trip, but was carrying the exact blueprint needed to build a thriving ecosystem.
Which leaves us with one final, perhaps more personal, implication of Ang's observations, one that extends far beyond the glass walls of an aquarium tank.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Well, we talked extensively about the paradox of the exposed cave, how a cichlid must find a way to perfectly balance the need to signal its availability while maintaining a vital sense of security against the dangerous environment.
The need to be seen versus the need to be safe.
Exactly. How do we translate that behavioral tightrope into our own lives? Because in our modern digital and social landscapes, we are constantly navigating that exact same tension.
How so? Like on social media?
Yeah, think about the spaces you occupy. How do you construct your own exposed cave? Whether it's the way you curate your online profile, the boundaries you set in your professional portfolio, or even just how you physically position yourself when you walk into a crowded networking event.
Oh, wow.
How do you build a structure around yourself that safely signals who you are and what you're looking for without leaving yourself entirely vulnerable to the open water?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. The architecture of our own vulnerability. It turns out we might be navigating the exact same currents as the Polar Parrot Cichlid, just looking for the right stage with a roof.
Sustained observation changes how we understand the environment around us. And sometimes, if we look closely enough, it changes how we understand our own behavior within it.
So next time you walk out of a store empty-handed, don't write it off as a waste of time. Ask yourself what you might have discovered instead.